Okay. Got to get myself organized. It's an endless task. Okay, that's nice. Okay. Well, first of all, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and all people who have been dads in the past, will be dads in the future. Even gals who are dads. I mean, hey, we're all, the idea is that anybody can be a dad, and anybody can tell a dad joke. So you can, one way or the other, you can accomplish dadness. But I mean, in the end, it really comes down to, how do we look after and benefit others, and how do we look after and benefit ourselves? Because in some ways, our parents did the best they could. I mean, they did. They did the best they could with what they had, and we did the best we could with what we had. But now, it's really our job now to finish the job and to raise ourselves, finish nurturing ourselves and bringing ourselves to our full potential. And I think that's really what all of the Dharma is about that, is about coming to our potential. And I don't mean the kind of potential that you see in movies where they say, oh, that young person, they have so much potential. You don't want a potential that kind of like weighs you down. You want a potential that has some benefit for you, right? Some benefit for yourself. And what's really interesting is that we are born with a full set of tools for benefiting ourselves and others. Just as you could say we have a full set of tools for harming ourselves and others. So we have a choice to make, really. Essentially, the choice is, what are we going to do with this precious life that we have? Because no matter what we've been through, we're still here, and that means, in some ways, we have a very, very precious life, and we have a very precious opportunity to make use of it for ourselves and for others. So, although I make jokes about dads, I'm being serious when I say I admire all people who take care of children. I admire all people who take care of themselves and to make their own lives better and the lives of others better. So my appreciation is there for all of you. Today, I wanted to talk about the Buddha Shakyamuni, our teacher, because of the occurrence this week of one of the 4 great holidays in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition observes 4 special days in the year that are determined by the lunar calendar, and they are all associated with events in the life of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni. One of these events was observed this past week on the full moon day of this lunar month that we're in the Tibetan calendar. And on this full moon day, the Buddha's birth, his enlightenment, and his passing away, all of them are observed on one day. That's a lot to pack into one day, but that's what that particular holiday is. It's known in other Buddhist traditions as Wesak or Vesak, and it's observed in all Buddhist traditions. The southern schools of Buddhism, the northern schools of Buddhism, they all observe this holiday in some way or other. And so today we're going to observe it by studying a prayer that is recited on these specific occasions. I enjoy talking about Tibetan Buddhist prayer for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that I grew up Catholic. So I know from prayer. I know some things about prayer. And so it was fun for me to go to my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, and say to him, well, what's the difference between Christian prayer, as an example, and Buddhist prayer? What's the difference? And he kind of reflected for a moment. And through his interpreter, he said, well, he says, I got to confess, I'm not 100% sure I understand Christian prayer. He said, so I could be wrong in what I'm about to say. He said, but my understanding is that in Christian prayer, you're asking someone who was never, ever like you to give you something that you need, to fulfill a need or a wish or a want that you have. And to basically sort of, for that being to give it to you or to arrange the world so that you receive it. And he said, whereas in Buddhist prayer, he said, you're talking to someone who was once just like you and wants nothing more than for you to become like them. So he said, because in the Christian tradition, he said, you know, God was never like you, and you can never be like God. So you're kind of like, it's kind of an unequal situation here. Whereas in Buddhism, he said, Buddha was just like you, and he understands you in ways that nobody else can. And he wants you to become like him, because all beings have a mind, and that mind has the capacity to wake up to its own inner wisdom and its own inner goodness. And in many ways, you could say that I joke around about this, I call it the good news of Buddhism. If you want some good news, we got some. And that is that we all have the potential to wake up, and we all have the potential to become Buddha. And that in this way, Buddhist prayer is taking a step in that direction. By using the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas or the great beings who have lived, not as gods, because they're not gods. The closest analogy I can find to it in religion that I knew is the Catholic saints. Anybody else grow up Catholic, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, all right, you got it. One of my Catholic friends said, you know, I've seen a lot of Catholics in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism. He said, and I think I know why. And it's like, why? And he said, we like smells and bells. This refers to being Catholic in the 50s and 60s when, during the Catholic Mass, bells would be rung and things like that. And then there'd be incense and stuff like that. So anyway, I know, right? But in Buddhist prayer, what we're doing is we're acknowledging that we're not Buddhas yet, and that we would like to become Buddhas in the future. And so these saintly beings, the Catholic saints, are not God, but they're revered for the holy lives that they led that speak of their connection to and their relationship to God. Because that's why all of the great saints are great, because they had a relationship with God that was unlike any other. And so, in any case, this is me talking about my background, but you get the idea. In Buddhism, there are no gods. There are just these saintly beings who showed us how to live and who we could become like if we would try. So I like this. And a friend of mine who's Catholic said, oh, don't you know the difference between the prayers to the saints and the prayers to God? And I said, no. I didn't learn that in catechism class, so I don't know. 12 years of Catholic education, and I don't know the difference between worship and veneration. He said, look, we use the word worship for God. So you worship God, but you venerate the saints. And I'm like, you have just given me the best explanation for Buddhist prayer that I could ever imagine. Because that's what we do. We venerate the Buddha. We don't, even though the word worship gets thrown around, we don't really, and you'll see it in the prayer we're going to study today, it gets thrown around. We just really venerate his example, and we want to emulate that example. So that's a little bit about the difference between Buddhist prayer and Christian prayer. And one of the coolest things about Tibetan prayers in particular is that they serve, from my point of view, They serve two functions. And that is, first function is they're incredibly inspiring because you hear about the amazing deeds of these enlightened beings. And you're like, wow, that must have been amazing. But the other thing you learn from prayers is history. You can actually learn teachings of Buddhism and history of Buddhism through just reading the prayers. Because prayers are often memorized. That you often learn them by heart, which means you get to own them, you get to keep them. Once they're memorized, you know them and you have them and they're with you and they inform you. And so there are lots of prayers. And a number of years ago, when we were in the old building, I gave a series of teachings on the 5 Karma Kaju, which is our lineage, the 5 Karma Kaju aspiration prayers, and maybe I'll do that again at some point to teach people, because these 5 special prayers are incredibly helpful for learning the history of Buddhism. They're incredibly helpful for learning the teachings of Buddhism. And if you've memorized them, you actually know a bunch about Dharma, the teachings of Buddha, because if you memorize a prayer, or even if you just recite it a lot, it teaches you every time you read it. I have a friend, a Dharma friend, who's in the process of memorizing some of these things. And she uses aspiration prayers as her main practice. And it's like, hi, I'm talking about you again. I don't think she really has memorization as her goal, but in a way it's happened because she knows things that are in the prayers now that she didn't know because she recites them in English. And so because she recites these aspirations in English, they go deeper. That's what my teacher said. He said, yes, I know reciting them in the language they were written in, reciting them in Tibetan gives a great blessing. But it imparts a great blessing. But if you learn it in English, he said, you'll internalize the meaning a lot better. So there you have it. A Tibetan born in 1924 who escaped Tibet in 1959 and was totally dedicated to Tibetan language and the use of Tibetan language in prayer is saying, recite it in English. You'll learn, you'll get it internalized. Of course, though, the general tradition here is that we still recite of most things in Tibetan. But today we're going to do a recitation, maybe in Tibetan, maybe not. We'll see. But the prayer I wanted to talk about is in the Red Book. I know I was supposed to do a prayer at the beginning here, and I forgot. I get too excited when I give talks. I just get too excited. 12 Deeds of the Buddha Shakyamuni starts on page 40 of this book. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, there's a nice picture of the Buddha there, too. Okay. All right. So in order to observe the proper form, I'm going to recite the refuge prayer that's on the laminated sheet. So it's like, Rinpoche, I'm trying. We'll recite it 2 times in English. Yeah, I know. Recite it 2 times in English and 1 time in Tibetan. Starting with the words in the Buddha. You're setting your intention by reciting this. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And now reciting it in Tibetan. Or sanje chudan soji chonamla Jangchu pardu dani kyapsuchi daji jinso jibe sunamki drola penshir sanje druparsho. Okay, thank you for helping me get honest with my task here. I finally did the opening prayer. So, The sheet of paper that you were handed is an enumeration of what are called the 12 deeds of the Buddha Shakyamuni. These are 12 pivotal events in his life that we recount in this prayer. Remember I said the prayer teaches you history? It's in here. This history of the life of the Buddha is in this prayer. There are two common prayers about the 12 deeds of the Buddha, a long one and a short one, and they're both here, beginning on page 40. They start with the long one and then eventually go into the short one, where it's the same 12 deeds, just recounted in brief, which is kind of nice, right? So remember I talked about the Buddha when he was Prince Siddhartha and he decided to leave the palace because he knew that even as the richest man in his city, he would not be able to solve the suffering of his people, but if he could go and become a holy person and learn spiritual truth, that he could help them find happiness in ways that he could not help them with materially. And so that's why he went for 6 years to the riverbank to study with all the holy men of his time, because he knew there was suffering everywhere in his city state where he lived. He knew there was suffering everywhere, but he recognized that it was actually internal suffering as well as external suffering. Yes, there was poverty, but there was also anger and jealousy and pride and all of the difficult things that human beings suffer from. And he knew that even if he opened his treasury, even if after his father died he became king, he could open up his treasury and give away all his money, but it wouldn't bring about happiness that would last for the people that he cared about. So that's why he left the palace behind. He left luxury behind and went and studied for 6 long years on a riverbank. And he realized after he was nearly dead from starvation that starving himself was not going to give him the answer to the question, why is there suffering? So he decided that the extreme of luxury and the extreme of deprivation, neither one of them were affording him the internal meditative atmosphere that he needed to make the discovery about the causes of suffering and the causes of happiness. So he left both of those behind. He left wealth behind, then he left deprivation behind. He took nourishment, sat under the shade of a tree. I mean, baking in the sun day after day, it takes a toll on you. And so he sat under this tree and he practiced meditation, having taken food and nourishment and given himself a relative comfort. He meditated. Some say it was just over the course of one night. Some say it was over several days, but he attained the deep meditation that gave him the answer that he had been seeking. That, as my friends in recovery traditions like to say, that happiness is an inside job. We like to say that happiness comes from within the individual and it comes from within us. And that's what the Buddha's discovery was, that we held within us the potential to bring about happiness for ourselves as well as the potential to bring about suffering for ourselves, and that we needed to make a good decision about how to do that. He taught the 4 truths known by the noble, that suffering's part of life, that it has a cause which is clinging and fixation, particularly self-clinging and self-fixation. And if clinging was the cause of suffering, then letting go is the solution. So that's the 3rd noble truth. Suffering's part of life, that's the 1st truth. Suffering has a cause, and the cause is clinging, that's the 2nd truth. Suffering has a solution, and that's letting go. That's the 3rd truth, but how do you let go? That's the 4th truth, which is the path that leads us into the right kind of letting go. And that brought about the teachings on the Eightfold Noble Path. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. All of these things, doing no harm, practicing virtue, taming the mind, that's the teaching that he gave. And so practicing that, we can bring about happiness and eliminate suffering. That's the Buddha's teaching. Now, the Buddha was not immortal. He was a mortal human being, and therefore, after 45 years of teaching, he died at the age of 80. And when he died, before he died, his students said, "Please don't leave us, we need you." And he said, "No." He said, I have given you all of the tools that you need to uncover your own Buddha nature. I've given you everything you need. Now you need to work on your own liberation. Work toward your own liberation with diligence. And so in a way, you could say that even in his death, he was teaching, telling all of us, time is short. Practice now. And I think that when you see the way these 12 deeds are recounted in the prayer in poetic language, you'll see all of these events here in this prayer. The 12 deeds are enumerated on the sheet. It says, descending from Tushita heaven. Basically, what this means is that he had a higher rebirth, and in this pure realm, he emanated into this world as a human being. Now that's the way it's taught in the Mahayana. Now in other traditions of Buddhism, it's taught that he accomplished Buddhahood in one lifetime. So this is obviously coming from a Mahayana perspective. But the idea is that this very special being who was either already enlightened or was just about to become enlightened was born. And so that's what the idea of is he descended from a higher realm, and he entered his mother's womb. He was born in the garden of Lumbini, which these places you can still visit. Lumbini is in Nepal. He trained in the sciences. He achieved athletic ability. He enjoyed the palace and marriage. He renounced the life of a prince. He practiced austerity for 6 years. He obtained victory over the Maras. The Maras are obstacles that prevent us from attaining Buddhahood. He experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. He turned the wheel of Dharma, meaning he taught, and then he passed away. And so there are different ways these deeds are recounted. There's another version of these in which the first two are joined together. He descended from Tushita heaven and was conceived in his mother's womb. And then after the passing away, they add another one, which is that he left relics behind to form the basis of devotion for beings in the future. So there's several different ways these 12 deeds are recounted, but this is one of those ways. And now if we look in the prayer, we'll see them all. It begins by saying, he who is skillful, compassionate, born in the lineage of the Shakyas, undefeatable by others, destroyer of Maras, and whose body is majestic like golden Mount Sumeru, king of the Shakyas, at his feet I prostrate. So he was the prince of the Shakya clan, which is why that's mentioned. And his body is golden like Mount Meru. When the sun hits the side of the mountain, this giant mountain, it shines golden. So then it says, he who first developed the mind of enlightenment, then perfected the dual accumulations of merit and wisdom, and in this age performed vast enlightened deeds and became the protector of beings, to him I prostrate. So the idea is that they're honoring the Buddha as a human being who was born, who lived a life in which he accumulated virtue and accomplished wisdom. That's the dual accumulations, and performed enlightened deeds. In other words, he lived a human life and then transcended it. He lived as a normal human being and then transcended and became more than all of that. Having fulfilled the needs of gods, because he was teaching them even there, and having known the time to tame the human realm, that's us, he descended from the gods' realm, came in the form of an elephant, and seeing the lineage of Shakyas, entered the womb of Maya Devi, to him I prostrate. There are many stories talked about the Buddha's conception, and this one has to do with a dream that his mother had. She dreamed that an elephant, a white elephant, came and entered her body. And that after that, the baby was conceived. Then it says, at the completion of 10 months, it was often believed in the old days that that's how long gestation was, because about give or take 10 months. The son of the Shakyas was born in the auspicious garden of Lumbini. At that time, Brahma and Indra, those are the Hindu gods, praised him and his excellent signs and ascertained him to be in the lineage of enlightenment. To him I prostrate. So the idea is that it's mentioning that he was born in Lumbini, so now we have that piece of information. And that he was praised by, even the Hindu gods praised him and his excellent signs and said, okay, this is the person who's going to teach all of us how to go beyond samsara. To him I prostrate. Then, the next page, the powerful youth, the lion of men, exhibiting skills at Anga and Magadha, defeated the arrogant competitors and became unchallengeable. To him I prostrate. So again, telling the history of this young man who was amazing in all kinds of ways. And he also accomplished all of the trainings of being a ruler. And so then it says, in accordance with the worldly customs and to avoid calumny. Now, how many people can use calumny in a declarative sentence? That's a tough one, isn't it? It means gossip, essentially. It means gossip, calumny. Oh my gosh, how old English of you, yeah. But he was accompanied by the retinue of queens. With skillful means he served the kingdom. To him I prostrate. It was common in those days for princes to have harems instead of just one wife. He would have many. So the idea is that he did everything that he was expected to do as a ruler. He kept a retinue of queens and so forth. So here is a person who accomplished the worldly life that he was supposed to. Talk about meeting your potential. He did everything he was supposed to do. But he was holding in his heart the wish to benefit beings. By seeing that mundane activities have no essence, he left home and traveling through the sky near Namdak Stupa. Namdak means like all pure. He took the ordination of renunciation from himself. To him I prostrate. So the way the story goes is there was a monument to a previous Buddha, which how could he, if he was the first Buddha of this era, be, oh, never mind. So the idea is that he went to this monument, which is like the monument that's out front of our place that has relics and so forth in it. He went to this monument and he took the vow of renunciation. He renounced his kingdom and he cut his hair and changed his clothes to, rags and so forth and so on. He decided to leave the luxury life behind. Those of you who have seen the movie Little Buddha, this moment is dramatized by none other than Keanu Reeves, who plays Prince Siddhartha, who takes all of his hair and he cuts it with a sword. Well, okay, that's great for Hollywood, but I don't quite know if that's how it happened. Anyhow, the idea is that he had this moment of renunciation. Then, intending to attain enlightenment by efforts, because when you're young, that's how you do everything, the hard way, at the bank of the Naranjana River for 6 years, he practiced asceticism by perfecting perseverance, which you would have to do to meditate day and night in that environment. He attained supreme absorption. To him I prostrate. In other words, he was able to accomplish very deep meditation through practicing this way, but he wasn't arriving at the wisdom he sought. So even though he had deep meditation, it wasn't enough. So he keeps moving. The next page, in order to perfect his efforts since beginningless time, at the foot of the Bodhi tree in Magadha, you see they're name-checking all of the places of pilgrimage that people go to. With unmoving cross-legged posture, by attaining the fully enlightened state, he perfected his enlightenment. To him I prostrate. Swiftly watching beings with compassion in the supreme places such as Varanasi, he was asked to teach. By turning the wheel of Dharma, that's what that means, he was asked to teach. He led beings into the three yanas. To him I prostrate. The three yanas, it said that the Buddha taught 3 different phases of his teaching. The first phase of his teaching was all about mindfulness and ethics and attainment of a state of non-suffering through practicing mainly mindfulness and ethics and gaining insight into the nature of happiness and suffering. The second turning of the wheel of Dharma, he built on the first and also taught about emptiness, an understanding of wisdom and the nature of all things. And in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, he taught Buddha nature, that all beings have the potential to awaken. He taught it at the very beginning, but he explained it in detail in the third turning of the wheel. How is it that all beings have the potential to awaken? So that's what it means by the three yanas, or the three paths. So now, I like it. Now we're going to start getting into the good guys and bad guys section of the history. In order to defeat others' evil opposition, he tamed the 6 heretical teachers, Devadatta and Mara, in the country of Kormojig. To the sage who conquered war, I prostrate. This actually refers to an episode that happened in the life of the Buddha when Mara, who is taken to be the obstacle makers, and the Buddha's cousin, Devadatta, attempted to split the Sangha. Devadatta tried to take it over, and because he thought he was better than the Buddha. And so the Buddha undertook a reconciliation where he presented himself and he presented Devadatta, and he basically gave truth to everyone about the situation and said that splitting the Sangha is I guess you could say, an action with vast consequences. We'll put it that way. And so that's what happened. It says he defeated them. And what this means is also refers to when the Buddha was challenged by 6 non-Buddhist teachers who said, hey, we think you're wrong. We think we're right. Let's have a debate. Now, debate was a high-stakes deal in those days because everybody loved logic so much. They could have been born on the planet Vulcan. They were all so logical that they venerated logic. They had debates, and if you lost the debate, then you would have to convert to the other person's point of view. So it was a high-stakes thing. They were challenging the Buddha, saying, you are wrong about how the world is. You know, your teachings are wrong, and we're going to show you how through logic. And he finally argued with them, but then he closed the argument by performing a miracle every day for 15 days. So they had to admit that he won the debate. That was how the story goes. Who knows what really happened? But it does sound like an amazing event. The idea that the Buddha could actually perform miracles and that this was evidence of the supremacy of his teaching. Who knows? I talked to one of my teachers one time, and he said, you know what the real miracle is? And he said, the real miracle is taming your own anger. Now that's a miracle. So that's something that all of us have the potential to learn. So then the next one, with virtues unequaled in the 3 worlds, he exhibited miracles at Sravasti and was worshipped by all the gods and human beings. He caused the doctrine to develop. To him I prostrate. And then finally, I like this one, in order to inspire lazy people to Dharma. In the clean land, yes, lest you think it's a bad place, in the clean land of Kushanagara, his Vajra-like immortal body passed away and attained nirvana. Yes, he was not immortal, he was human. And to him I prostrate. Since perfection is indestructible and is the object of future beings to make merit, he manifested his remains with many ring cells, which means it's essentially a form of relic, and left them as 8 types of reliquaries. To him I prostrate. This refers to an event in his life before he died. Remember I said that his students were saying, hey, how are we going to live without you? And then they also said, how are we going to honor you after you're gone? He said, go to the places that were important to me in my life. Go there, and you'll meet me there. And so then that's why he had his ashes divided into 8 parts and went to these 8 places of pilgrimage that people still go to today. And then it says, okay, so now that's the end of the long prayer. Now the short one. They just append it right on there. When he, the chief of men, was born. Now we're going to get the 10 or the 12 deeds in a very condensed form. When he, the chief of men, was born, took 7 steps on this great earth, which is commemorated in this amazing little statue. Somebody found this on the internet and liberated it from a curio shop and brought it to us. This is recalling the Buddha's birth. The story goes that he took 7 steps. Okay, he took 7 steps, and then he announced, "I am supreme among beings in this world." Well, my goodness. My goodness. You know what I tell people? I tell people, okay, so maybe you don't believe that, it's okay, but isn't it just the idea of it remarkable? The idea that a being was so pure in that way that they could leave lotus flowers behind them as they walked, you know. I mean, you know, again, this is dramatized in the movie Little Buddha and things like that. I mean, whether you believe in it literally or if you take it as allegory, the idea is that even as a child, he was remarkable. And the idea here of presenting him in this way in a bowl of all things is because there's a tradition in Buddhist countries of bathing a statue of the baby Buddha as a way of purifying your own negativities, you know. Usually you would put 3 different ladlings of water over the head or shoulder. You hear it both ways. I think some people think the head is not right, so they have you put it over the shoulder. But whether you choose the head or the shoulder of the baby Buddha to bathe, the idea is that the statue doesn't really get any cleaner, but your heart does. So you, by honoring the Buddha in this way, by taking the ladle of water and pouring it over his head, the first one is, you know, may I leave behind all negativity. You know, you think that you're washing away and giving up all negativity. And then the second one is, may I accomplish all good qualities, and so forth and so on. And then the third one, I have forgotten, so I'm going to have to look it up before we move forward, because this is the first time we will be offering this, is today. When the talk is over, if anybody wants to stay behind, you can bathe the Buddha in honor of that. Anyway, so I get a big kick out of this. I wrote a whole column once for the newsletter because I used to have time. I don't know where that time went. And I would write articles for the newsletter, and I wrote one about this incident. And it was because someone painted me a picture of the Buddha's, you know, this 7 steps thing. But the person painted just a lotus flower and then the chubby little baby feet walking out of view. And I just thought that was lovely. Anyway. It's one of my favorite paintings that I own. So sorry, I got a little funny there. When he, the chief of men, was born, took 7 steps on this great earth and proclaimed, "I am supreme among beings in the world." To him, great wise one of that time, I prostrate. He who first descended from the... And now, see, it's already, you're learning, right? Because now you've seen this before, right? And he who first descended in the form, descended from the Tushita God's realm, entered his mother's womb in the royal state, and was born as the sage in the Lumbini garden, the blessed one God of the gods. To him I prostrate. In the royal mansion, he who was worshipped by 8 nurses. Among the Shakya youths, he demonstrated his athletic skill. And in Kapilavastu, he accepted Gopa in marriage. The unequal body in the 3 worldly existences. To him I prostrate. He who showed sadness at the 4 gates of the city. This refers to when he was taken on a tour of his city state by a chaperone, because his father was trying to hide from him all the sufferings of his people, and finally he insisted And so his father, the king, sent a chaperone with him to hopefully give him context so he wouldn't get too upset and wouldn't leave and become some wandering holy man, which is probably not something that his father wanted for him. So he showed sadness and cut off his hair at Namdak Stupa and practiced asceticism at the bank of Naranjana. To him who is free of obscurations, I prostrate. In Rajgura, the sage subdued a mad elephant. In Vaishali, a monkey offered him honey. And in Magadha, he attained enlightenment. To him who is shining with wisdom, I prostrate. At Varanasi, he turned the wheel of Dharma. At the Garden of Jeddah, he exhibited great miracles. At Kushinagara, he passed away to nirvana. To him whose mind is like space, I prostrate. Now we come to my favorite part of the whole prayer. This is my favorite part of the whole prayer. Thus, by the merit of praising the deeds of you, the Blessed One, Master of the Doctrine, may the activities of all beings become equal to your deeds. The reason I like this is because I read an article once by a Tibetan scholar who said, if you think about it, okay, maybe the details of our life maybe the details are different, but all of us will eventually live the life of the Buddha. All of us actually will live this life. Okay, maybe we won't be born in a palace, but maybe we'll be born in a country that is wealthy beyond our imagination. And maybe we will see that wealth has no essence, and maybe we'll say there must be something more in life than just this. Maybe we'll go wandering, maybe we'll go seeking, maybe we'll learn meditation, maybe we'll begin to uncover our own inner nature. Maybe we too will be inspired to practice and attain Buddhahood to benefit ourselves and others. And so he said that all of us are eventually going to live some version of this life at some point in time. I love that. I love that so much because it means we all have this immense possibility to be of benefit to ourselves and others in ways that we can't even imagine now. And I love it that at the end of the prayer we say, may we all, by the merit of praising the deeds of you, the Blessed One, Master of the Doctrine, may the activities of all beings also become equal to your deeds. May we all become very like the body of the Such-Gone Buddha, and may we have retinues, life extent, Buddha field, and excellent signs similar to his. By the power of praying and offering praise to you, in the area where we are residing, may the sickness, poverty, and wars be pacified, and may Dharma and auspiciousness increase. Now you see why I like this part, because this part is all about wishing and hoping for the very best to occur, not just for us, but for everyone. May there be the auspiciousness of the longevity of the doctrine, with Buddhas appearing in the world, the doctrine shining like sunlight, and the development and prosperity of the doctrine holders, teachers, and disciples. I love it. It's like, may all goodness come for all of us, and may we become like the Buddha. Whew, that was a lot. But I think I'm going to stop here, because what I really wanted to do was to introduce this prayer to you so that you could see what prayer is like in Buddhism. You could see how praising the deeds of someone else can actually accumulate the causes within you to accomplish those same deeds in the future. Because that's how everything begins, with an idea. We have the idea of enlightenment. We have the thought of enlightenment, which is really interesting because that was the name of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's first Dharma talk in Columbus. The thought of enlightenment. It's just, what a great idea, right? So we have this thought of enlightenment, and then slowly we come into contact with the things that will help us realize that. So anyhow, I wanted to just introduce you. We have two choices at this point. I could take questions or we could recite the prayer. I don't know what to do. Let's see if there's questions first. Questions, thoughts, observations, yeah. Yeah, we have, yep. I figured answer the questions first, and if there's time, we'll pray. But if not, then that's okay. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for that teaching, Lama Kathy. That is really precious to understand that prayer.
Yeah, exactly. You get so much more out of it when you see it as both history and then you're actually sort of teaching.
Yes.
Because, like they say, when he realized that luxury was, not where it's at. And
Right,
stuff like that.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So my question is, well, it's a comment and a question. So, and this might just be a psychologist issue. It's the abandonment of his wife and child.
Oh, sure, right.
And how does Buddhism kind of
How do you square that?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I have not heard Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche answer this question, so I feel a little bit at sea because, see, this is the benefit of having the same teacher for 40 years. You get to hear people ask him virtually every question you could imagine, but I can't remember. I do believe he was asked this question, but I can't remember his answer. Okay. So I'll give you my answer, and
sure.
we'll see how it works.
Okay. Because
yes, he did actually leave his wife and son in order to go and practice. So there's two narratives that come in my mind. Narrative number one is that he wanted to accomplish something for everyone, and that's why he left, because he knew that if he stayed there, he wasn't going to find it.
Right.
And he didn't want to go into this life of deprivation with his wife and son.
Sure.
And the other thing about it is that he didn't kick them to the curb. He left them in a palace.
There are some
with
advantages
people,
to that.
yeah, with people who love them.
Right.
And so he left them with as much support as he could give them.
Sure.
So yeah, you could say, somebody once called him a deadbeat dad. Oh, that's a great topic on Father's Day, isn't it? Sorry, Buddha, we didn't mean that. Somebody actually called him a deadbeat dad because he left his wife and child, But, again, he didn't leave them on the street. He left them in a palace. So maybe that was his calculus in his own mind, that I also don't think he knew how long he was going to be gone.
Absolutely.
So I really can't answer the question other than to say, for him, he knew he had done his duty. Remember that whole thing about a retinue of queens and stuff like that? And to avoid calumny, the idea is that there would be whispers about him if he didn't have a retinue of queens. And he would not be able to be a ruler without all the things that rulers are supposed to have. So he had all those things, and he had produced an heir, which was his number one job. Right. If you want to look at it strictly from the point of view of monarchy, he had actually done his job. So it's like, Dad, he said to I'm sure in his heart, he's saying to his father, Dad, look, I did my duty to you and the kingdom. I'm out of here. Right. But still, again, does that square as him being unkind and cruel to his wife and son? I just don't know. Eventually, his wife and his stepmother became nuns, and his son became a monk. So I guess he helped them in lots of ways.
Sure.
So maybe he left them, but it sounds like things turned out okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's just me making a guess about somebody I don't know.
Understood.
But the idea is that we have to take we have to take what we can from the situation.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
All right. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. No. Yeah. Hi.
I've also heard a very different response to that same question.
Oh, good. Share. Please share.
If we actually accept the teachings of the Buddha, especially the second and third wheel, there is no Siddhartha. Siddhartha was not inherently existent.
Yeah, Prince Siddhartha you're talking about, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no difference between Siddhartha, his wife, his children, everyone in his kingdom. Like with the view of emptiness, they're all the same person. They're all the same sentient being. So by leaving his kingdom to turn the wheel, he was actually seeking to bring his entire continuum, including his wife, his children, his kingdom, all the birds, all the bugs, all the ghosts, all the gods, the various deities, all the hoo-ha, into the actual mind of enlightenment. So
Yeah.
that was the perspective that I was given, because it's a good question.
It is a big question.
Right. So with that realization, it's like, oh, rather than abandonment, it was actually seeking to save his entire, all of us,
Yeah.
which we're not different than him,
Right.
like from the
Yeah.
ridiculousness of samsara.
Yeah.
But that was the response that I was given.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much. And I do encourage this question to be asked again and again of as many teachers as we can ask, because this way our knowledge grows. I always tell people that there's no such thing as a silly question, and part of the reason I feel like there's no such thing as a silly question is that every question prompts us to quote a teacher or to quote the Buddha. And so that gives us an opportunity to expand our knowledge. So I'm totally into it. Yes. This will be the last
Thank you,
question.
Lama Kathy. In the beginning of your talk, you were comparing Christian prayer and Buddhist prayer. And I love the idea that Buddhist prayer is different because he was just like you and we have the same potential. But I have to confess, when you read the 12 deeds, that doesn't sound like me. I was not a jock who performed excellent in athletics. And that idea of how Buddhist prayer is different aligns very well with a foundational point of view of his life. But the Mahayana view of him descending from heaven, there seems to be sort of like a paradox there.
Yeah,
because
I know.
I personally like the
I get it,
idea that
yeah,
he was
sure.
exactly like all of us.
Sure.
So I was just wondering how you navigate that.
I've heard it both ways. From the Mahayana point of view, he was a 10th level bodhisattva who came to this world to live what's called the life of a supreme nirmanakaya. That's the way I've heard it explained. It's not the only way it's explained, but it's one way that it's explained. And, and so the idea is that whether we believe that he was an ordinary human being who became extraordinary in the space of one lifetime, or if we believe he's this extraordinary being who came to show us how to do it. You see what I'm saying? So either way, it's a wonderful story and an encouragement for us. Okay, the other encouragement for us is the story of a great being like Milarepa, who truly started from scratch. As a human being, in one lifetime, he accomplished Buddhahood, and it's like, wow, that is just amazing. I totally agree with you that I think we will not necessarily do all of the 12 deeds in the order in which they're presented, or in the manner in which they were presented. At least we learned how to, feed ourselves, read and write, and assemble IKEA furniture. We've learned so many. We can be functional as a human being in lots of ways. And so whether, as you say, whether or not we're a skilled athlete or any of that kind of thing, I think really the ways in which we're alike the Buddha is that we are born in a situation of relative wealth and comfort. We see that relative wealth and comfort is not enough to bring happiness. And then we seek to find that which is beyond material. So we seek that which is spiritual to find a way to accomplish what is the potential within us for goodness and for wisdom. So maybe not the 10 deeds in that order or that type, but we will all follow that set general trajectory into Buddhahood at some point. I kind of prefer to see it more like that.
I also wonder too, just from like a scholarly historic perspective, are things like the 12 deeds and the 35 marks sort of part of this time in India? There were a lot of gurus everywhere and a lot of different religions, and this was sort of a way of differentiating.
Yeah.
Our guy was this guy, and this is how you know it's the real deal.
Right, exactly. Oh, well, yeah. I totally agree with that. And the 32 marks, actually.
Oh.
Anyway, but still, the point is that Yes, because there were even like worldly ideas about perfect human beings. There was the idea of the Chakravartin king, who would be male, and and would have all of these characteristics, and that the idea of a universal Dharma ruler, a person who would rule with justice and wisdom and compassion and all of that kind of thing. There was this idea of a universal ruler, somebody who had those characteristics. Now, these days, we would probably say they exhibit all of the Myers-Briggs characteristics of a perfect human being. But anyway, whatever, in those days, that was the type of so yeah, they used these ideas to show that their particular brand of wisdom is a brand of wisdom that everybody could get on board with. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, go ahead. Yeah. This will be the ultimate last question. Yes.
Hi, Lama Kathy.
It's good to see you.
To your point about there not being a bad question, and I apologize for being late, but what page are we on?
We are on page, we are looking at the prayer called the 12 Deeds of the Buddha Shakyamuni.
Okay.
And I think you came in during the commercials. And it was on page 41.
Page 41, thank you so much.
Yeah, page 41 through 46.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'll catch the footnotes on the repeat.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what we'll do is, what I'll try to do, is in the YouTube, when we get the YouTube up online, I'll try to remember to go in and put the link to the prayer in there so that people can download it. I think this prayer or some version of this prayer is downloadable from our Dharma downloads page, which can be accessed from the online programs tab. So if you go to our website and click the online programs tab, you'll go to a page, and then partway down that page, if you scroll and scroll and scroll, you'll find at least 15, maybe 20 prayers and files to download where you can learn about Dharma and say some prayers. So yeah, absolutely. Well, because of time, we will have to stop here. But that's okay. If anybody wants to stay behind and bathe the Buddha, you're welcome. Because the next thing doesn't start till, the next group doesn't come in till about 1:15. So, because we're going to do the protector chant today between 1:15 and 1:30, depending on when everybody gets here. And that'll be another hour. This place is busy from like 8 a.m. on a Sunday until 2, 3, something like that. So we have first shift, second shift, third shift, people who come in for different things. So we get to serve a lot of people this way. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for your patience at listening to what really amounted to an extremely long presentation about the life of the Buddha. But hopefully by talking about it 3 different ways, 3 different times, this would give you the repetition you need to be able to follow the prayer as you are reciting it. So we'll do that on another occasion. But in order to dedicate the goodness, we will recite the dedication prayer on the laminated sheet. I also want to take a moment to thank the shrine team for the beautiful work that they did in preparing the shrines for the Buddhist holiday. It really looks dressed up. I tell you, it's beautiful. And then also thank the AV team. I walked in on your class yesterday. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being there. And then all the people who helped to feed us and take care of us while we're in the building. So thank you very much. So we'll dedicate all of that to the benefit of all beings. And we'll just do it one time through in English, okay? By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, appreciate you being here. Have a good week. See you next week.